Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. You're all welcome to the June edition of Real Estate, today's webinar. And it's such an honor to have you all here. I can see quite a lot of people who had um, quite some attendance and hoping that a lot of people will also join. Please so tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody else that we're on air. I mean, like they say, and so we're starting right away. And so you're all welcome, and it's such an honor to have you in this webinar. And I believe strongly, as usual, we're going to be having exciting and wonderful time together. So without further ado, I mean, this is already 5 minutes past 12, and we have a lot to do today. And so we'll delve into it quickly. But before we'll delve into the topic of today, I would like to say I welcome you once again. And just a bit of some housekeeping rules. Would like to encourage as many as possible who have questions or will have contributions to use the chat box to ask their questions. And also, if you want to speak, if you want to ask a question and you want us to promote you to the panelists so that you can speak, we'll have such opportunity for one or two persons to make their contribution. So please feel free, get your notebook, get your pen, and if possible, a cup of coffee, and get ready for today's Real Estate webinar for the month of June. So this month, we'll be talking, our topic for this month of June is opportunities in green building investment in Nigeria. Opportunities in green building investment in Nigeria. And we have no other person to do justice to this other than somebody who is a specialist in this area. Dr. Penny, it would be good to see your video. So while I say a few things about you, so it's good to, hey, great, yeah, it's good to see you. And so I'm just going to say a few things about Dr. Tenny. I mean, Dr. Tenny's profile is such a profile that, I mean, I possibly won't have to do all of the readings here because we're going to do all of the readings of Dr. Tenny's profile. I can assure you, I'm going to eat into the timing of the webinar, but it's fine. I'm going to just read a few things about a few things about Dr. Tenny and get her to come on board immediately. Tenigbade is a registered estate surveyor and valuer and a lecturer at the Department of Estate Management at the Nile University of Nigeria. And also she's the acting head of department over there. With a PhD in housing from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa, a major research interest is in sustainability in the built environment. Plus, she is a certified edge green building expert at the IFC and an international DGNB consultant by the German Sustainable Building Council. She is also a professional member of the Green Building Council Nigeria, and she continues to research and contribute to the growth of the green building sector in Nigeria. One thing that this profile didn't mention, which I'm going to mention, is that Dr. Tenigbade Udu is also an alumni proud alumni of Ubosi and Company. So it's such an exciting, it's going to be exciting this afternoon. So Dr. Tenny, you're welcome. And so before I allow you to just go straight away, once again, I want to welcome as many on board. Please invite as many as possible. They were starting. And like I said, should you have questions, I should start. And I think Dr. Tenny would like to make it a bit interactive. So it's possible she has some question and she'll have to look at the chat box to see your response and all that, okay? We have a little challenge with the naming and all that. We don't know what's happening, but again, these are technical issues which at the background we are trying to resolve. So Dr. Tenny, you are welcome and it's good to have you. So over to you. Let's talk about the opportunities in green building investment in Nigeria. It's good to have you, Dr. Tenny.
Thank you, Olusojo. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Even if you didn't mention that I was an alumnus of Bosiele and Co, I was going to say it myself anyway. Um, I think it's a very big honor and privilege to be facilitating this session today. I want to first of all thank Ubosele and Co for the opportunity to do this. I want to particularly thank my bosses, Mr. Obosi and Mr. Ele, for this opportunity. For for those that didn't hear Oluso just say it before, Ubosele and Co is home for me as it is home for anybody that has worked in this company. That's one very special thing about Obosile and Co. Once you have worked in this company, you can come in at any time and feel at home. And I think it's a very rare honor, it's a very rare privilege, and I'm very thankful for it. So let's go into the business of the day. I'll just share my screen. I think you have to, I've been disabled, so you have to enable me to share my screen.
Give me 1 minute to do that, please.
All right. Okay. All right, I think I can do that now. Great. So please just let me be sure that you are seeing my screen. Can you
Yeah,
see my
Dr.
screen,
Teni.
please?
Yes, Doctor. Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
we can
okay.
see.
Okay, so good afternoon again. Today we're talking about opportunities in green building investment in Nigeria. Um, and we'll be looking at this is the outline of what we'll be talking about today. Why green buildings? What exactly are green buildings? What are the investment opportunities and what do we do after this webinar? So why green buildings? I've green buildings is quite a young subject in Nigeria today, right? So there are many places where I go and I say, "Oh, I'm a green buildings expert," and they're wondering, what are green buildings?" I've even had people ask me, "Does it have to do with the color of the building?" But before we go to look at what exactly green buildings are, let's first of all talk about why we need to talk about a different class of buildings. So why are we talking about green buildings? So I want to believe that at one point or the other, everybody on this webinar has heard about climate change and global warming. A lot of people have heard about those things and they don't exactly know what it means, but I'm sure that it's impossible to say that you haven't heard those terms at one point or the other, right? And that's because they are global phenomena. There's nothing they talk about in the news today that doesn't, come to center around climate. I mean, there's a whole conference that all global leaders attend at the end of every year, just to talk about climate issues, right? And basically, I'll try to put it in the simplest terms. Climate change is simply a shift in the climatic pattern of of the globe or of the earth. Once upon a time, we could definitely say that, okay, from so months to so months, we'll be experiencing rainfall. From so months to so months, there'll be harmattan. From so months to so months, there'll be dry season. But as we all know, these days, I mean, it's almost like the weather has gone bonkers, right? So that's what we call climate shift. There's been a total shift in the pattern of weather and climate of different areas. And global warming is something that is responsible for climate change. So, what is global warming? Global warming is just an increase in the atmospheric temperature of the Earth, right? Um, and I'm sure that you can bear me witness that we've been experiencing more intense heat in recent years. As a matter of fact, record shows of science shows that 2023 is the warmest year on record, from the from the date that global temperatures, atmospheric temperature have started being recorded, 2023 has been the warmest year recorded ever. And what that means is that there are also some other things that happen as a result of global warming. For instance, there's some parts of the earth that are, when we talk about places in the North Pole, places like Antarctica, those places are generally always frozen, right? But because of global warming, what's now happening is that ice caps are melting. So mountains that used to have high ice caps have now started shrinking. Why? Because the ice caps are melting. Now, when the ice caps melt, what happens is that the water runs down into the water bodies. So water bodies are swelling. These oceans and seas are swelling. And they say water must always find its way. So that's why we keep on having all sorts of stories of flooding and all that, because the water must move into some places. So those are some of the effects of global warming and climate change. So what's causing the global warming? Basically, global warming is caused by an increase of a particular gas or a particular group of gases in the atmosphere, and they're called greenhouse gas. Now, greenhouse gas is comprised of different kinds of gases. There's carbon, there's methane, there's even water vapor, part of greenhouse gas. But most of it is carbon, and that carbon is released into the atmosphere by human activities. Human activities, which is basically the burning of fossil fuel. Now, when we say fossil fuel, we are talking of fuel that is extracted from the ground. So we are talking of crude oil. We're talking of coal, things like that. And if we check it, there's almost nothing that we can do today without burning fuel. If it's in driving our cars, if it's in creating electricity, in manufacturing, in heating of homes, there's always a way of, there's always something we're doing to burn fuel. As we're burning the fuel, what we're doing is we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. The more carbon that gets into the atmosphere, the thicker the greenhouse gases are. Now, the greenhouse gas, just look at greenhouse gas like as a blanket, right? An invisible blanket that is in the atmosphere. So what it does is that as sun heat is being emitted from the sun, it is trapped in the greenhouse gas, which keeps it in the atmosphere. So that's why you have all that warmth. So there's actually a blanket of gases there that we can't see that's keeping that heat in the atmosphere. So if we're going to reduce the atmospheric temperature, we need to reduce greenhouse. Have to reduce the amount of carbon that is being emitted into the atmosphere. How do we reduce carbon? It's by finding a way to reduce our use of fossil fuel. And that's why in the Western world, if you've noticed, things like electric cars are becoming more popular. So that is one measure that they're using to reduce, because electric cars do not use any form of fuel, right? So they're not burning fuel, they're not emitting carbon into the atmosphere, right? So this is why we now talk of green buildings. Buildings, remember I said that greenhouse gas is as mostly as a result of burning of fossil fuel, which is as a result of human activities. Science has now shown us that buildings contribute up to 40% of the greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, right? So when we say buildings, it is not just by putting a building in place that this carbon is emitted. The way it's calculated is all the activities that go into making sure this building stands and is functional. Okay. Those are the things that are checked to see how carbon is emitted. So, for instance, let's assume you're a property developer and you want to develop a house. One of the first things that you do is to look for land and then clear the site. So all the energy that goes into clearing that site, there will probably be a bulldozer or a tractor or something that comes to clear the site. That tractor is using fuel and emitting carbon into the atmosphere. And then you need to do your foundation, you need blocks, you need cement, you need steel. All the energy that goes into production of cement, which includes the extraction of minerals, production of the cement, packaging of cement, transportation of cement from factory to warehouse, from warehouse to site, all that energy is calculated as part of um, carbon that is emitted from buildings, right? After the building has, of course, there's a lot more energy that goes into production because there are different materials. You're probably using tiles, you're using steel. All these things are very energy intensive and they also contribute to emission. Then, after the building is standing and the occupants stay in it, there's also the energy that is required to run the building to make it functional. For instance, electricity, cooling in the in the tropics and heating in the temperate region. There's all sorts of things. There's cooking, all sorts of things that we do. You know, help in a place like Nigeria where power from the national grid is not stable. There's also generators and all that. So a combination of all these things put together, embodied energy of material, and then the energy from the operation of the building, all of them come together to contribute to this 40% that we're talking about, right? And research also shows that if it is unchecked by 2050, this rate can be doubled. So it can go as high as 80% if GHG from the built environment is not checked. All right. So energy used in form of embodied energy of material. So embodied energy of material is simply what I described, like what is the energy that goes into the production of material? What's the energy that goes into the production of plywood, for instance? So there's the energy you need to fell the tree, the energy you need to process the wood, and so on and so forth. So that's what we call embodied energy of material. And then operation of building. Operation includes what I said about, electricity, heating and cooling, and all those other things. Now, buildings are also a major cause of freshwater decline and depletion. Yes. So there's something that I don't know. Can you still see my slide? Seems to have gone off.
I can't see the slide. Let me just get
Okay.
into it
Okay.
quickly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
because I've been disabled again.
Okay, I think there's sorry, a bit of technical. Let me get on it. Sorry.
Okay.
Dr. Tony, I think you can. Okay, yes, great. Sorry about that. Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So I was saying that buildings are also a major cause of freshwater decline and depletion. Now, there's a general misconception when it comes to water and the use of water. Um, you know, Basic science teaches us that about 70% of the globe is water. But what people don't realize is that less than 1% of that 70% of water is actually potable water. Okay. So yes, there's water everywhere, but there's very little water that can be used. Okay. And what people also don't understand is that water is a fresh water. Fresh water now is can actually finish, okay, if it is not properly managed, right? Now, buildings are also a major cause of freshwater decline and depletion. What does that mean? For a building to stand, first of all, even in production, when you're constructing a building, there's a lot of water that goes into that. But even during operation, the amount of water that buildings use, is it in kitchens, is it in bathrooms, or basically cleaning. There's a lot of water that goes into the functionality of a building. Okay, and there's a necessity to also check that. So, in summary, according to the World Green Building Council, buildings are responsible for 40% of energy and process related CO2 emission, that's carbon emission, 50% of all extracted materials, right? Because buildings are made of materials that are extracted. Is it limestone, like I mentioned before, steel? Is it wood? A lot of it goes into building. 33% of water consumption and 35% of generated waste, which most of the time ends up in the landfill. Okay. Now, at the background of this, I also want us to remember that
Hello, Dr.
global
Tene.
population,
We can't hear you again.
really, you can't hear me?
We
Hello,
can
Dr.
hear
Tene.
you. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, you can hear
Okay, go
me.
ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Just go back to sharing my screen. All right. So I was saying, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes,
You can
yes,
see my
very
screen.
well.
Okay. So I
Yes.
was saying that at the background of everything I've said, I want us to remember that global population continues to increase, right? I think we're on is it 7 billion? 7 billion plus now. And as and population increases, we should remember that there is, of course, they need accommodation, they need places to occupy, whether it's for living or for working, whatever. So property development is not likely to stop. Okay, so what exactly are green buildings? So there's a picture. I hope we can all see this screen, and there are four different buildings here. I'd like participants to type which one of these buildings do they think is a green building? Is it A? Just type the letter. So if you think it's A, if you think it's B, if you think it's C, if you think it's D, if you think it's A and D, if you think it's C and B, just you can put it in the chat section. Um, yes. Do participants have access to the chat section? Can they type in responses?
Oh, yes, they can. They can use the chat box to do that. Yes.
Okay, so please, can you just okay. So someone says C. I can see only one response. Are you sure participants can respond? I can see only one response.
I'll find out from. Let me just get to
Okay,
speak with
someone
the.
says the chat is disabled. Someone says the chat is disabled.
Okay, so let me please. I mean, just go on while I try to get the back end
Okay,
to
so
fix
so
this.
uh, so apparently people are answering in the question section. So somebody says
Okay, so
A
so
and
let's use the
C.
let's use the question and answer
Okay,
session. Then people can use that.
all right.
Yes.
So somebody says A and C. Someone says A and D. Someone says A, D. Someone says D. A, C, and D. Okay. D. So I'll just wait for two more answers and then we continue. Someone says C. Okay. Mm, C. All right. Okay, I think we can stop now. I just needed to get okay. And someone says all. Okay, someone says C and D. Someone says all. That's interesting. Someone says D. Okay, I think we're good. So let's let's just continue now. Trying to get this out. Okay. So the person that answered all was actually correct. So each of these buildings that you see right now are green buildings, right? And the purpose of this quick exercise was, just to help people understand, because for people that at the beginning, I said that not everybody understands what green buildings are, but for people that think they know what green buildings are, there's a kind of prototype that, people think, okay, when I see this, this is a green building. But um, this is to help us to understand that any building can be green. There's no particular way that a green building should look. What makes a building green is not the way it looks, it's what it does or what its features are. So each of these buildings, in fact, A, C, and B are actually buildings in Nigeria, right? So that was the purpose of this. So let's go ahead. What exactly is a green building? So a green building is a building designed, constructed, and operated to minimize its negative environmental impact and promote resource efficiency throughout its life cycle. Bear in mind what I said at the beginning, okay, that buildings are responsible for up to 40% of global greenhouse gas emission, up to 40%. So now a green building is a building that has been built in such a way that it contributes little or no negative effects to the environment. Okay, so it's reduction, it's a carbon emission has been reduced to the barest minimum. Its water efficiency is really high. In many cases, even embodied energy has been reduced to the barest minimum. Or we can also say it's a building constructed to reduce carbon footprints, conserve natural resources, and create healthier living and working environments for occupants. So when we say carbon footprint, what we're saying is what is the amount of carbon that such a building emits to the environment. So basically, what are the features of a green building? Remember, I said a green building is not necessarily what it looks like, but what its features are. Okay. So these are some of the basic. Sometimes it could be more than this, but these are some of the basic um, features of a green building: energy efficiency, water conservation, sustainable materials, indoor environmental quality, waste reduction, site sustainability, and rating certification. A green building may have all. A green building may have some. A green building may have just one or two of these features. A green building may have more than these few features, right? It depends on what the building was designed or set out to achieve. Okay, so we'll look at some of these features as although I'm not trying to dwell on the features of a green building. We're more interested in investment in it, but at least if you're investing in something, you should be able to understand what it means. So let me go back. Let me just talk about some of these features. So energy efficiency means that um, a building which has been designed in such a way that there is no waste of energy. Okay. So when we say waste of energy, you know that sometimes there's some lights in our houses or in our homes or even in our offices that remain on 24 hours of the day. They never go off. Whether they are needed, whether they are not needed, they are always on. Okay. So whether we like it or not, that is a waste of energy, right? So if a building has been designed in such a way that um, as soon as day breaks, the light goes off automatically. When it becomes night time, the light comes on automatically, and there's no need for someone to say, "Oh, I forgot to put off the light." The light goes off on its own. That is an energy efficient feature. Okay, thank God that the use of LED bulbs has now become common. You know, I mean, there was a time that they weren't that common, and we used to use those other yellow bulbs that used to use a lot of energy. So the use of energy saving bulbs is also an energy efficient feature. Now, one of the things that people, and I think I'm talking about that in the next slide, is one of the things that people think of when they hear green buildings is it has to be very expensive. Why? Because it has to use high tech equipment. But do you know that a feature as simple as just shifting the orientation of a building away from it's so that its major facade, the main facade of the building, does not face like the rising sun or the evening sun, is a green feature. So you know the sun rises from the east, sets in the west. So if the main facade of your building, for instance, faces the east, it means that as the morning sun is rising, it's shining straight into your building. Your walls are absorbing that heat, you know, it makes the place hot. So it means that you will need more energy to keep the place cool and comfortable. So you probably have to leave your ACs on for longer periods. Even when the light is off, you probably have to turn on a generator just to make sure that the place is comfortable. However, imagine that the main facade of that building could be turned a bit, maybe to face like the um maybe around the north, you know, or not facing that eastern sun. Do you know that it means that that building will now require less energy for cooling? So even that alone is an energy efficient feature. In some cases, planting of trees to block that major sun from having direct access to the building is also an energy efficient feature. So those are some examples of energy efficiency. Then there's water conservation. Okay, water conservation um, includes features like water efficient fittings, sanitary fittings. So, for instance, these days we have those WCs that have the dual flush buttons. Okay, where there's a big one and a small one. The small one is for urine and the big one is for feces, right? So that you don't when so someone who urinates does not need to use as much water to flush the toilet as someone who is doing number two, right? So that's one of the features. There are also, you find out that the newer buildings that we have these days, you hardly find bathtubs, because bathtub is one way of really wasting water. You're probably using how many liters of water to take a bath and throw it and pour it out. So showers are more water efficient. So those are some of the examples of. There's also rainwater harvesting, which means that rainwater is actually collected like a season like this where there's a lot of rain. So rainwater is actually collected into a reservoir, can be slightly processed and used for things like car washing, watering plants, instead of using normal potable water, which you will use electricity to pump, you know. So the sustainable materials, I already talked about how embodied energy of materials also has a contributory factor to atmospheric GHG. So sustainable materials, sometimes it's research that is making us use some of the materials that we are using. There are actually materials that can be used that don't need to be so energy intensive, right? For instance, laterite is a very abundant resource in Nigeria. So there are actually buildings that are built with stabilized laterite bricks. Okay. If you want to later finish them with cement, you can finish them with cement. If you just want to polish them, you can polish them. Indoor environmental quality, that has to do with the comfortability of occupants of a building. How comfortable is the inside of a building? How how is ventilation? How is cooling? How is heating in the building? Then waste reduction. Waste reduction is a totally different topic, because waste reduction, there are different grades of waste reduction. There's waste reduction um, from the building itself. At the end of the life of the building, you want to bring down the building. What happens to the debris that you generate from bringing down the building? Has the building been built in such a way that building materials can be removed whole and reused in another building? That's when we talk about circular economy. So that's why I said it's a different topic on its own. Then site sustainability, including landscaping, are there green like gardens and trees around the building and so on. And then rating certification. So I'll be talking about rating certification um in other slides. Now let's go to some misconception about green buildings. I've already mentioned some, but every time you mention green buildings, some of these things are the misconceptions that people have, that they are more expensive than conventional buildings. People just generally believe that once you mention green buildings, it has to be more expensive. Now, unfortunately, in Nigeria, because we don't have so many green buildings, there is no data we don't have enough data to prove that it's not necessarily more expensive, right? But it is from um, other countries, from data from other countries, we can see that even if it is more expensive than conventional buildings, it is just a very marginal rate. The difference between them is just very marginal. All right. Then there's that green buildings are the same as smart buildings. So there's so many places where you mention green buildings and they say, yes, I know what it is, smart buildings. Green buildings are not necessarily smart buildings. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you are not even putting any high tech. It is just what how you have built the house that makes it green, right? With smart buildings may not even necessarily be green because smart buildings use a lot of technology, and for technology, it means that there must be a power, right? Electricity, 24 hours. If that building is going to function properly, there has to be power for 24 hours. And you know how much it is, or how it costs, how difficult it is to have 24 hours power in a country like Nigeria. So smart buildings may not necessarily be green buildings. Green buildings may be smart, but not all smart buildings may be green. Then that they're not meant for the Nigerian market. So at the beginning, I when I talked about climate change and global warming, I think I did mention that one of the things about global warming and climate change is that it is not the effect is global. So we can't say that after all, which production are we doing in Nigeria? We are not really emitting carbon here. Therefore, we do not feel the effect of global warming or climate change. No, the effect of global warming and climate change is global. So we can't say that, therefore, we do not need green buildings in Nigeria. We need green buildings all over the world. And then another misconception is that only high income properties can be green buildings. That is also incorrect. Okay. I usually say that um, for those of us, that go home to our hometowns and villages, hopefully there's still a few hot houses that are hot with thatched roofs. Those are the 100% green buildings, right? So what am I trying to say? It's not necessarily any building can be green. Okay, any building can be a green building. So yes, earlier on I mentioned rating systems. So what are green building rating systems? So I just said now that a hut in our village is a green building, right? However, the only thing is nobody has gone to rate it and put a logo on it and say, okay, this building has been certified green. Now, in urban areas, there are people that say, oh, there are people that think that because they have put one or two features in their house, it's a green building. But in cases where you need to certify that the building is actually green, there are written standards. There are written systems and standards that are used to that check to make sure that okay, of a truth. Because remember that there's an objective. We're not just building green because it's trendy. There's actually an objective, and the objective is to reduce global GHG. Right. So these systems and standards are used to check to make sure that, okay, of a truth, this building has actually met the standards. Um, Sadly, in Nigeria today, we do not have a local rating system. Although the Green Building Council of Nigeria I can categorically say that Green Building Council of Nigeria is currently working on a local green building rating standard. Okay, hopefully before next year, I think it should be ready. But for now, we do not have one. However, these are some foreign ones that have been used in Nigeria, to certify some buildings. So we have the LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So this is the product of the United States Green Building Council. Then there's the BREEAM, the Building Research Establishment Environmental Assessment Method, which is from the United Kingdom. There's the Well Building Standard. There's the EDGE, which is Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies. Now, the EDGE is a product of the IFC. The IFC is the private sector aspect of the World Bank. And they created this standard for emerging markets. Okay. In Nigeria today, I think I can categorically say that this is the most localized one, because what they've done is they've collected data for different countries, and the World Bank has access to all sorts of data. So they've collected data for different countries, and they used that data to create standard for each countries. So unlike the LED, which focuses on standards in the United States, the Edge actually uses standards from Nigeria. So they use our electricity rates, water rates, they use our climate, they use everything to create the standards. Then there's the DGMB, which is the German Sustainable Building Council, which is also another standard. And then there's the Green Star. The Green Star is used by countries like Australia and South Africa. Yeah, South Africa localized it to their own country. So there's Green Star Australia, there's Green Star South Africa. So in Nigeria, we have the Green Building Council Nigeria, which is the body that is in charge of all things green building in Nigeria. And basically, what they are doing, the mission, as stated here, is to lead the transformation of Nigeria's built environment to create buildings and communities that are environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable through engagement and partnership with all green building stakeholders, including estate surveyors and valuers, and all stakeholders in the built environment. So they do this through advocacy, education, standards, and certification. As I said, we're currently working on a Nigerian local rating system. So are there green buildings in Nigeria? Of course, as from the things I've been saying, it's obvious that there are. So this building, I'm sure we recognize this building for those of us in Lagos. And this is the Nestor building. And this building is LEED certified. So this building is a green building. As you can see, there's nothing on it that shows that it's different from other buildings. But of course, from the standards, it has been checked, and it does show that it is a green building. Then this is Evercare Hospital. Evercare Hospital is EDGE certified. I think it's the first, it's the first health facility in Nigeria that's been certified green. We have these other examples. There's the Peridot Parkland Estate in Badagry. It's an residential estate of about 252 units, if I'm not mistaken, and it is also EDGE certified. Stanbic IBTC Towers is Green Star rated. The retrofitted Sterling Bank Tower is not yet certified, right? But I am aware that they are in the process of getting a certification for it. It is also a green building. And then there's the Lekki Pearl Estate by Alphamid, which is also EDGE certified. So these are just a few. Now, we don't have we honestly do not have a large stock of green buildings in Nigeria. There are a couple of others. Of course, I couldn't have put everything in. There are some student accommodation that have been certified green. There are other offices. The Heritage Place in Ikoyi is also a green building. So there are a couple of buildings like that. But to be honest, there's a very small stock of green buildings in Nigeria. Or let me not say green buildings, let me say certified green buildings in Nigeria. All right, so that brings us to the investment aspect of green buildings. What are the prospects for the green building market in Nigeria today? Now, these are extracts from a global research by data analytics, and this research was carried out. The surveys were carried out on 79 respondents from 79 different countries across the globe, and Nigeria was one of the countries. Okay, and the first graph on the left shows the level of green building activity according to all respondents, right? Now, this was in 2021. So the second bar, the second bar is like a projection from 2021, right? So as we can see, 1% of to 15% of projects. Like respondents said, about 1 to 15% of their projects were green buildings. And that was 24% of the respondents said about, so maximum of 15% of their projects were green buildings. Okay. 28%, which is the most significant, but the 28% said more than 60% of their projects were green buildings. Now, projecting to 2024, it was projected that that amount will rise to 42% by this year. Okay. So it means that there's an increase in the number of people that are actually investing in green building. There's an increase. Now, why are people investing? Why are people deciding to invest in green buildings? So that takes us to the next graph on the right. First of all, green buildings helps you to lower operating costs. So what do we mean by operating costs? Operating cost simply means your utilities, how much you pay for utilities. So you can be sure that if you stay in a green building, you are paying less, you're going to be paying less for electricity, you're going to be paying less for water. Okay. And at the end of the day, you find that operating costs, if you accumulate operating costs, is actually a very large expense in in making the building functional. Okay. So as we can see from this graph, that is a major reason why more people are investing in green buildings. So I usually say, when I was doing one research, I usually say that yes, the main objective of green buildings is to lower global GHG, and improve the environment. But to be honest, there are a lot of people that really don't care about the environment. No matter how much you talk about the environment, it's really not their business. But when you can talk to an investor about money and you say, look, you're going to be making money in this place, you're going to be saving money in this place, you can understand that, yes, you now be picking their interest. So lower operating costs, especially for people who are running investment properties and they're gaining income from it. I mean, in Nigeria of today, I don't think there's any investor that doesn't want to hear about lower operating costs. If you're telling him that you can reduce the cost of diesel you are buying, of course he'll be interested. So lower operating costs, 66% of the respondents are interested in green buildings because of lower operating costs, improved user occupant health and well-being, 62%. Future proofing assets, I'll talk about future proofing assets and what that means later. Then education of users or occupants about sustainability, 32%, and documentation certification providing quality assurance, 32%. Okay. Let me talk about future proofing assets. Although I think I'm going to talk about it later. So let's just move on. So also from that research, financial benefits of green buildings compared with traditional buildings. Traditional buildings can also be called conventional buildings. We see that average reduction in operating costs in the next 12 months for new green buildings, the reduction in operating costs is as high as 10.5%, while in green renovation or retrofit simply means a conventional building that you have now like renovated or changed some features and it has now become a green building. That's the meaning of retrofit. So in retrofits, the savings was up to 11.5%. Now, average reduction in operating costs in the next 5 years equals to 16.9%. You can save up to 16.9%, plus or minus 17%, both on the new buildings and the retrofits. And then average increase in asset value, there's an almost over 9% increase in the asset value. When you are investing in green buildings. Okay, now we find on the right says percentage of respondents whose firms have more than 60% green projects. Now, why I put this here is to show that in the whole of Africa, you can see that it's only South Africa that is stated here. South Africa has the biggest green building market in Africa, right? Other countries are still very they're still very insignificant. The green building market in other countries are still very insignificant. I think apart from South Africa, we have Kenya and maybe Egypt, before we now start to talk of Nigeria and Cameroon, right? But I mean, about 24% of the respondents had over 60% green projects as at 2021, and it's projected to be up to 31 this year, 31%. So there's actually a growing green building market, even in Africa. Okay, there's also Cameroon here. Cameroon in 2021 was 11%, and it is going as high as 24% this year. One of the significant growth is Brazil. Brazil in 2021 had 6%, growing to as high as 39% this year. All right. So one other thing about green buildings is premiums, especially in rental property. So when we say premium, it means that the rental value of green buildings is actually higher than conventional buildings in various parts of the world. In North America, according to this table here, and this is also from a research by JLL Research, in North America, it's plus 7.1%. So what that means is that if a three-bedroom flat in in a conventional building is going for say 2.5 million per annum, a green building of probably the same size would have a rental premium of plus 7.1%. In London, it's as high as 11.6%. And in London, it's quite understandable that it's that high because there are actually regulations that now affect property development in the UK. I think the UK has a target um, to change all the conventional buildings to green building by 2050, if I'm not mistaken. I think the public buildings are supposed to all be green buildings by 2030, and all other buildings are supposed to be green buildings by 2050. So what it means is that most new developments and renovations are gearing towards green buildings. And if you speak to people in London, they'll tell you that if you're looking for an apartment and you you want a new building. Why? Because they are built green, it means that they have lower utility costs. Right. So the older buildings are more expensive to maintain. You need to pay more to heat up the buildings and all that. But the new buildings have already, they already have green features in them. So occupants are paying less in terms of utility. So even if they're paying slightly more, they don't mind because they'll be paying less on utility. And in Asia, it's a rental premium of 9.9%. So it means that people who have invested in green buildings are getting higher returns than people that are invested in conventional buildings. So having said all this, and my point for taking us through that data is to help us to understand that there's actually a trend, globally. Everybody is moving more towards green buildings. I said I was going to talk about future proofing your assets. So, what we now see is that a lot of governments, because climate change is actually is a big deal, every government is talking about, every economic forum is talking about climate change. So there are more policies, more regulations that are tending towards, okay, you know what, we need to decarbonize the environment, we need to decarbonize everything, right? So policies are tending towards, you must now do this, okay? It is likely, I mean, as we are seeing in the UK, it is likely that very soon we may be seeing a government that will come in and say, you know what, you can't get building approvals if you do not have green, if your building is not green rated, or you can't get building approvals if you don't have the following green features. So by investing in green buildings now, what you are doing is future proofing your um, assets, right? So that it's not when these regulations come that we now start looking for, okay, so what do we do? What do we have to do? We hope we don't have to bring down the building. We don't have to change the roof. How about we start investing in these green buildings now, so that it's like a proactive measure towards what is most likely to come later. Okay, so here I'm talking about the drivers for green building investments in Nigeria. The World Economic Forum highlights 2024 as the tipping point for investing in sustainable buildings. And some of the reasons are what we've put here. Now, more corporate organizations are committing to sustainability. Buildings are major evidences of these commitments. Okay, so as if you listen to the news, there's always one talk or the other about ESG. ESG is the acronym for environmental, social, and governance. And most companies, want to show that okay, they are aligning with environmental values. They are contributing to social growth and all that. Okay, so a lot of buildings, a lot of establishments feel that building green is one of the ways of showing that okay, we are actually committed to environmental environmental sustainability. Okay, and even here in Nigeria we've seen it. Why are banking head offices investing in green buildings? Why are they, they don't just invest in it, just to reduce their utility costs, but they also publicize it, making sure that everybody knows that okay, now our building is green, or we've even certified it green, right? So most corporate organizations are using that as an indicator to say we are committed to environmental sustainability. Right now, Nigeria as a country is a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol, which is one of the United Nations uh, forum for climate action, right? And that's why our president, along with many presidents, always attends um, the UN COP every end of the year, right? Last year was the 28th one. And what one of the things that comes out of that meeting is that each of the countries have to commit to what they are going to do to help to mitigate climate change. So it's called, they come up with this document that is called the Nationally Determined Contributions. Okay. And in that nationally determined contribution, what they say is, okay, this is as a country, these are the things that we are going to do to make sure that we reduce global greenhouse gas. Now, the table I put at the side here is from our last nationally determined contribution. So even though that document does not show anything about the housing sector or the real estate sector in particular, there are things across other sectors that can be achieved from the real estate sector or from the property sector. So the places I highlighted there, for instance, energy efficiency. Nigeria has committed to 2.5% per year reduction in energy intensity across all sectors. So across all sectors includes the real estate sector, whether it's the housing, whether it's commercial, whether it's there's this also affects us. And also it says 13 gigawatts off grid renewable energy, you know, and in brackets, you can see here it says solar home systems and so on. Then reduce grid transmission and distribution losses to 8% of final consumption of electricity in 2030, down from the 15% in 2018. So these are some of the things that can be achieved from green buildings, right? And it is a way of, contributing to these targets that we have given ourselves. Also, um, sustainable building regulation across the world are becoming tighter, as evident in countries across Europe and the UNEP buildings breakthrough. So, as I said before, investing in green building is future-proofing your assets. Why? Because regulations are becoming tighter. Okay, everybody is now trying to come up with one policy or the other to make sure that our buildings are trying to helping to mitigate climate change. Okay, so the unit buildings breakthrough, for instance, is a I think it's a bill or something that came up, I think last year, and some countries decided that they would go back and create policies that will include that will make sure that buildings include green features, maybe green certification or so. So even though I think there were about 27 countries that contributed to that breakthrough, so even though Nigeria was not one of them, you know, who knows what can happen at the end of this year or at the end of next year, Nigeria may become a signatory to it. So what that will now mean is that to now come back to our building codes, our building regulations, and become tighter and stricter. Okay, so if we are following the world trend, it only makes sense that we do not wait till we get those policies before we start investing in green buildings. And Nigeria's extensive housing deficit is a major opportunity for decarbonizing the built environment by the introduction of green homes. Okay. We don't know what the exact number is. Sometimes we hear 17 million, sometimes we hear 24 million, but whatever it is, imagine that those new housing units, even though they're coming in trickles, are coming in green homes. So it means that we are contributing homes that are not degrading the environment. Then increasing energy costs is making renewable energy a cheaper alternative in buildings. Of course, I don't think anybody needs to beg anybody to find alternative to both electricity from the national grid and petrol or fossil fuel powered electricity, because they are extremely expensive now. So anybody that can afford renewable energy in their homes is definitely they're the ones enjoying, they're enjoying cheaper electricity now. So that's also a driving force, right? And a selling point for green buildings. Then demand for sustainable buildings is increasing due to lower operation costs. I talked about that before. Environmental and climate action awareness are also drivers for higher demand for green buildings. Whether we like it or not, more and more people are knowing about climate change, right? And environmental sustainability. They're teaching it in schools. Primary school students are talking about it. Secondary school students are talking about it. So there's an increasing awareness for environmental sustainability, and that is also a driver for increasing demand for green buildings. So, having said all this, what do we recommend? We recommend that while the climate action finance sector in Nigeria is still nascent, unstructured and fragmented, investors should explore available green funds and grants for their projects. So because climate change is a global issue, right? There are actually some sources of funds and grants. They may not be easy, they may not come by so easily, but I mean, as investors, if the research is done well, there may be some source, maybe through the IFC, maybe through there may be some source of funding for this kind of projects. Now, investing in green building is a commendable form of portfolio diversification that helps investors to future-proof their portfolio. I already spoke about that. ESG is fast becoming a major metric for evaluating corporate bodies. Investing in green buildings is one of the indicators. I also mentioned that to how corporate organizations are using green buildings as an indicator that they are committed to ESG. And then investment in green building is a proactive measure that aligns with the increase for demand for the commodity. Okay, so considering everything that I have said before now, the likelihood that there will be more regulations, ESG and all that, investing in green buildings now, will be a proactive measure. Like, okay, I have the products even before the demand comes. All right. So having said that, I think I have come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'm willing to take any questions.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so very much, Dr. Teni. That was really, please, the back end, can you quickly, I know a few persons cannot actually put in their chat. At the back end, can you just allow people to send in their, questions to the chat box or the question and answer area? Dr. Teni, that was wonderful. Thank you so very much for that presentation. Whilst you're waiting, like I said earlier on, we're going to be giving a few persons the privilege to say one or two things, to ask questions. Yes, so yes, to ask questions, a few persons to ask questions, and you need to take quite a few questions. But before we go into that, Dr. Teni, you actually said quite a whole lot, and I don't want to use the word worried, but maybe I am actually worried. And so let's have this talking point before we begin to have people send in their questions and probably a few persons who want to come up and raise up their hands so that I can get them promoted. So please, if you have question once again, you can raise your hand, show of hand over there. At some point, I'm going to get the backend to put you up as a panelist so that you can make your comment and you can actually ask your questions or also make your contributions. Okay. Now, Dr. Charlie, I want to go back to listening to you talking about this issue of this green building and all that. And I said earlier on, I seem to be worried, and my worry is coming from this premises. How much of awareness how much of awareness do you think we do have? Because honestly, there's so many misconceptions that you have actually cleared in the course of this presentation. Initially, there's this thought or this belief that, oh, green building is always very expensive. It has to be this and all that. You've cleared the air on that. But the question is, how much of awareness, the first thing I want you to address, because we're still going, the other thing I'm going to come back to is the issue of when you talk about, I'm going to come up with one data that I have recently and how we can begin to work towards that. How much of awareness do you think in Nigeria, based on this data you've rolled out, how much of awareness do you think we have with this regard, maybe alongside with the developers, and investors currently in the real estate space? Not just that, also for some of us who are into property management, in terms of maybe advising and speaking to our clients on the need to go back to ensuring that our building are green building, even if you don't get them certified immediately, of course, that's the end point we want to. But how much of awareness do we have?
Okay. To be honest, the level of awareness is low. Okay, the level of awareness is low, but like I said, the Green Building Council Nigeria has been doing they've been doing quite a lot in recent times to let people understand what green buildings are, to create this awareness among people. The IFC Edge has also been doing a lot in terms of awareness, you know. Hopefully, quite a number of people, quite a number of more people, are starting to understand. But like I said, one of the problems we have is we don't even have enough data, because even if when you're marketing something to someone, you want to be able to show them data to say, okay, look at this. This person was able to save so much on utility bills. So we don't even have enough data, to present to people when we're talking about green buildings. But on our part as academics, it's why we produce papers, talks like this. I think this is a very brilliant idea. Talks like this. One or two people would have heard something that will make them go back, to research. So this green building, what exactly are they talking about? Yeah. But to be honest, the level of awareness is really, really low. The other day, I was opportune to be in a meeting with the president of Red and another person, where we talked about green buildings, and they were really interested, So yeah, we're pushing it forward. We're hoping that, estate firms too will be able to, because estate surveyors are, we are like the people that we're like the consultants that investors would come to say, okay, I want to invest in something. What do you think? So we are hoping that, estate surveyors will be able to present them as options. Like, I think this is a good form of investment, and all that. So, but generally, the level of awareness is really low. Is really low.
Thank you, Dr. Tony. Once again, please, if you want to make comment, please show by raising of your hands. I could get 2 or 3 persons to make comments or make contributions or ask direct questions from Dr. Tony. You could also send in your questions into the chat box. Thank you, Dr. Tony, for that. The other thing I actually want to go into, you mentioned there's a portion you talked about retrofitted stuff. I mean, basically, so not necessarily having to say, okay, new buildings. So even the whole buildings, we can begin to bring in some elements of green building into that. Now, recently, I read about there's a research, I mean, not research, but there's a statement by the United Nations saying by 2050, Nigeria's population will grow as much as 400 million people, right? As much as 400 million. And so I'm wondering, um, and knowing what our background is, in Nigeria with this issue of, you also mentioned that deficit of housing in Nigeria. And we're going towards a situation where we're going to be having the population surge as much as 400 million in 2050. What should we be doing in terms of this green building to ensure that the production of houses or housing, that will be coming henceforth meet this standard of green building? Or what would you be advising? Because I mean, like, I'm glad when you talk about meeting with the Redon people, and these are people who are interested in investing in housing development, and quite a whole lot of people too want to invest in one to another. What do you think we should be doing, one, as a nation, two, as individuals or as promoters of this green building initiative?
Okay. So the issue of population is a big issue. There was something I mentioned, but I said I wasn't going to go into fully because it's a different subject, and that's the circular economy, right? So let's take a place like Lagos for instance, right? It's one thing to say I'm a developer and I want to invest in green buildings. Where's the land in Lagos?
Mm.
Where's the land? Do you understand? So when it comes to circular economy, we now start talking about greenfield and brownfield. So greenfield means, okay, I enter a virgin land and I want to start developing, and I clear this land for estate. That is where the land is available, right? Um, as much as that's a good idea because you are providing housing, it also has a negative effect on the environment, because when you are clearing land, what you are doing is that you are destroying a whole ecosystem, right? You are removing the trees and the plants that used to be there, the organisms, the animals that was their habitat. You have displaced them, you know. So, but when we say brownfields are places that were previously developed and maybe have now dilapidated, and then we can now move in there and redevelop. Okay. But now that we're redeveloping green. Okay. So we
Mm.
have not displaced any organisms, yet we have provided new buildings. Okay. And in providing new buildings, we are now thinking of how do we optimize space. So we are building vertically instead of horizontally, right?
Horizontally.
Because we are
Mm.
taking our population into consideration. So
Consideration.
there
Mm.
are options, right? There are options. Retrofitting, yes, retrofitting is a good option, but you see, retrofitting can be dicey, because it can be expensive. Okay, because sometimes the features you actually have to change a whole feature, and while you are removing something, you are probably destroying something that has to be replaced. Okay, so that's why we say that when it comes to green building, it is always advisable that you put it in at the design stage. It's not after you building that. Don't take green features as an afterthought. As you are thinking of the design, start putting those green features into the design. It helps you to save costs, right? So the green features should be put into the design. And for most rating standards, what they do, I mean, for Edge, that's what Edge does, and that's what DGMB also does. What they do is, when you have two certifications. So you have the preliminary certification, which is the certification of your building design. Okay, so you have done the design, you take it to certification, take it for certification, they look at it to say, okay, of a truth, this design actually contains green features. Then there's the final certification, which is after you have constructed the building, they now come back with that design to see that did you actually maintain the standards in that design. Okay.
Mm.
So after that, that is when you now get your final certification. So it's possible for you to get preliminary certification and you don't get final certification if it doesn't comply. Okay, so retrofitting is a good idea, right? But for developers that are starting, what we say is make sure that the green, you start your designing your green from that inception stage.
Okay, thank you. I can see that, please, the back end, can you bring Lawrence Ayeni up? I think Lawrence Ayeni wants to make comment. Can you get Lawrence Ayeni quickly up? Of course, we've already had about 2 questions also, but before we go to that question, can Lawrence Ayeni at the back end, is Lawrence Ayeni there? Okay, so Lawrence Ayeni, can you unmute yourself and also just introduce yourself and ask your question or make your contribution? Please unmute yourself, you are still muted. Lawrence Ayeni. Hello, Mr. Lawrence Ayeni. You're still muted. Do you want to unmute yourself so that we can take your comment or contribution?
Okay, good
Okay,
afternoon, Dr. Teni. In fact, I really didn't know that. Okay. Sorry, my name is Olaolu Ayeni. So I really didn't know that there was so much progress being done in terms of green buildings in Nigeria. So I was really surprised that we even had a kind of council which was working on it. Because it's been some area that I've had a personal interest because of my interest in climate and all those kind of things that I've had personal interest in. However, my area of question is that, are there certification? Because I thought we were talking about certification, because based on what I can hear you say, there will be need for training of professionals in this line. If you are going to do retrofit or you are going to go into brownfield, there will be need for some form of training and enlightenment. So is there some form of certification or professional development that comes into play in order to be able to achieve this future in terms of green buildings? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Teni, please hold your thoughts and let's see if we can get the other. I can see there's another person who raised his hand. Please, back end. Please, can you bring that person up? So just hold your thought while we also get the comment from this second person who will also introduce himself and ask the question so that you can take it together before we look at the question at the chat box. Please, back end, can you bring this person up? I can see a hand raised up. Yes. Okay, good. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself and just make your comments or your questions. You are muted, please. Can you unmute yourself, sir or ma'am?
Good afternoon, Dr. Teni. My name is Olawale Adeyemi. It's been an eye-opener. Thank you very much. And thanks to both CLF for this initiative. You talked about the Green Building Council. How can we get information on what is being done and so as to be able to follow up with this, especially for those of us who have an interest in this, space of climate change and green buildings? If there's a Green Building Council, then their activities, I would be interested in knowing what they do, and if there are, opportunities for collaboration, especially as we go along the space. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think so. Let's see. Okay, good. Those are Dr. Teni, can you quickly take those two questions before we go to the one in question and answer? Then we'll see if we have any other before we begin to wrap up.
Okay, so I'll take the first question by Mr. Ayeni, who says, are there trainings or certifications that people who are interested in greening their buildings must take? So definitely, technical know-how is one of the issues that may be affecting the growth of green buildings in Nigeria. But remember that I also said that in a lot of cases, it's just the features. Sometimes it's features that we need to, not necessarily special installations. It's just the features, the design, and how they are to be used. So basic knowledge for building construction would work. However, and I'll use that to answer the two questions. The Green Building Council offers a lot of trainings, short courses every now and then that can help to enlighten anyone who is interested in green buildings and all that. Also, if you go online, for instance, I mentioned the IFC Edge. The IFC Edge is open to. In fact, the IFC Edge has they have an online app, okay, they've made it free. Anybody can use it, right? And what it helps you to do is, you can actually put in your design into that app and then see the effect of your design on your final, what you want your final result to be, right? So basically it helps you to, as you're putting, what it does is that it measures the functionality of a building against a conventional building, right? So using a baseline case, for instance, with the different features on that app, you can see, if I put in this feature, this is how much energy I'll be able to save. If I put in this feature, this is how much water I'll be able to save. If I put in this feature, this is how it will increase the energy use of that building. So you can use that app. It's free to use online. The payment only comes when you want to certify the building. But if you're not interested in certifying, you can actually just use the app to do your designs, just to make sure that, okay, I am actually having a green building. For the second question by Mr. Olawale Adeyemi, the GBCN, I think what you can do is you can go to the website. They have a website, and that's gbcn.org.ng. Okay, so there you can see if you want to join, if it's membership you want to join, and it's a very, you can join a committee to even to help to promote green buildings in Nigeria. And then you can also have, like I said before, there are various trainings and short courses that the council usually gives every now and then. So you can go to the website gbcn.org.ng.
Okay, Dr. Sen, let's quickly go to the few questions here. I mean, I have, Mr. Alex Ajikobi says, thank you, Dr. Teni and the entire Ubosele and Co team for this wonderful presentation. He said, you have mentioned and shown how green buildings are cost-effective operationally. What about the CapEx aspect? How cost-effective are these buildings, especially when there is a need for any replacement of any part?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Alex. So I don't know how early you joined, but I said one of the setbacks that the green building sector is having in Nigeria is lack of data. Okay. So it's difficult to actually place to be able to say that, okay, in terms of and that's why I said that it's a misconception that it is more expensive, because you can't say that if you don't have data to prove it, right? So it's very difficult. But I just mentioned a few minutes ago that the IFC Edge has an app online that you can use. And one of the features of that app is that it actually helps you to calculate the payback period of the project. Okay. And I said earlier that fortunately, because IFC is a World Bank institution, they have data. They have very good data. So they will use current interest rates. They'll use current inflation rates. So by using that app, it gives you an idea of, your additional cost if you're adding some features, or how much you're saving if you're adding some features. And then it also gives you an idea of the payback period of that project.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Teni. Let's take also from Mr. Alex, let's take the second question. Once again, I still can take one or two persons who want to make comments. You can raise up your hands, as we begin to wind up. So this question is also confirmed if the present economic situation and government policy actually encourage green building investment, most especially in the commercial aspects. The advent of work from home and blue chip companies leaving the country, which are major drivers of the demand, has reduced the occupancy ratio of most commercial green buildings in Nigeria. Hence, how flexible are these buildings to accommodate other use? Wow, Dr. Ten, I think this is a very, very interesting question. Very
It
interesting
is, to be
question.
honest. It is.
Very
Um,
interesting question, honestly. I love this question. Okay, go ahead, please.
so I'm looking for the correct way to answer this question, right? Um, Regulations, honestly, yes, people are leaving, corporate organizations are leaving the country, but have you noticed that commercial buildings are still springing up? Okay, and we keep wondering who is occupying these buildings, right? But I'll let me tell you something that I know. Okay, I am aware that there are many international organizations now who would not rent a property if it is not certified green. Okay. I'm aware of at least two I am very sure of that will not rent a property, they will not occupy a property if it is not certified green. Okay. So it means that yes, some people are leaving, some people are still taking properties. And you want to be, as an investor, you want to be able to um you want to be able to provide when there's a particular demand. Okay. And I said because of the global trend, everybody is trying to show commitment to climate action, trying to show commitment to environmental sustainability. So people want to take, they want to be able to say that my office is green. Okay. So I don't think, I mean, this question doesn't have to do with green buildings, it has to do with properties generally, right? That people are living, work from home. Okay, if people are working from home, then go into constructing green residents, right? The whole idea is just make sure that your property is environmentally sustainable, whether it is commercial, whether it's residential, whether it's recreational. I mean, Evercare is a hospital and it is green. Data centers are being green, right? So whatever kind of property you are constructing, make sure it is environmentally sustainable.
Thank you, Dr. Tenny. Okay, so whilst I will begin to wind up now. We'll begin to wind up, but again, there are two other questions I want to ask you. And this is coming from the premises of understanding that you're also a specialist in this angle. I mean, Dr. Tenny, we've done quite a lot of things together in terms of, like I said, a proud alumni of Obos and Co. Okay, because you're also a valuation person, right? Can you speak to incidentally, last week we looked at last month, the topic was on valuation. Now you talked about green building. How the valuation of green building, right? Do you want to say a few things about the valuation of green building? How these futures that we're talking about, does it have any major impact on the value of the building? That's one segment of the question. The other segment of the question is, do you think financial institutions are tilted towards financing green building? If that is the case, do we have data to show that financial institutions will be more willing to finance real estate development, how be it commercial or residential, that are green in nature than the conventional one in nature? I hope you got that question. Yes.
Okay. So let me start with the first one. So for valuation, to be very, very honest, valuing green buildings, it's different from valuing conventional buildings. However, it is very possible, for someone who is unaware to look at, at the beginning I said green buildings don't necessarily look different from conventional buildings. So it's not as if you can just see a building and say, this building is definitely a green building. It doesn't work that way, right? So if a valuer, just approaches a building and wants to value it, he'll probably just value it as a normal building. However, it is now up to the owner of the building to say, look, my building is a green building, certified, and I want it valued as a green building. Now, I heard recently about a company or about an organization that has a green building and wanted it valued. And they did not find a valuer that specializes in valuing green buildings. So they traveled to South Africa to fly in valuers. to
My
value the building.
goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay. So there are some intrinsic values that green buildings have that need to be valued specially. That is the only way we can see from the data I presented earlier. You can see that they are actually giving us definite premium amounts or rates for premiums of green buildings over conventional because there's a way it is being valued. So green buildings are valued differently from conventional buildings. Okay, so that's a very academic topic. I don't think I need to say more than that here. Now, for this, what was your second question again? Yes, funding.
Yes.
You're talking about funding. Okay, so I'm not sure. I don't think there's any special funding system for green building.
I'm talking about consideration from financial institution with
So,
regards to either yes.
So I think it now depends on the ability of the investor to play into. So of course, I mentioned that there's some companies that corporate organizations now that want to be known for either ESG. I mean, Sterling Bank builds a solar tower, and they made sure that there was a lot of fanfare about it. Everybody had to hear about it. So as an investor, if I'm approaching my bank, I can also decide to say, look, you give me this loan. This is what I want to do with it. And we can both ride on the wings of, oh, look at what we are doing to promote sustainability. There are a couple of green funds available, even globally. There's a green climate fund. I don't know if you're aware, but the green climate fund is not accessible to individuals. You can only access the green climate fund through special agencies, designated agencies in your country. And it means that you now have to go and look at what are their, so they have particular sectors that they take interest in, right? So I'm not sure that real estate is one of those priority sectors, but if energy is one of those priority sectors, I think real estate can come in through because real estate uses a lot of energy. So real estate can come in through the, energy sector. So there are funds, and I said it at the beginning, it's now the ability of investors to look into, okay, how can I access these grants? Which bank can I talk to? What can I do, so I don't know that there are some organizations that are very interested. There's some programs, but it will also, it will take the investor actually doing their research to know, okay, how do I get access to these funds?
Okay, Dr. Tony, thank you. Please, back end, I think there's one more. Let's take this one more comment from this person. Then we just, in 7 minutes thereabout, I think we should be wrapping up. Please, can you bring this other person up to promote this other person? Yes, bring that person up and let him or her unmute herself, introduce herself or himself, then ask your question or make your contribution. Please, can you unmute yourself? You're already promoted. Unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and please ask your question or make your comment. You are still muted, sir or ma'am. Can you unmute yourself? You've been promoted. Okay. Okay. Can you unmute yourself? Okay. I mean, I guess this person is finding it difficult to unmute himself or herself. Okay. So, Dr. Tony, quickly, as we begin to wrap up, I think this person is not forthcoming. As we begin to wrap up in 5-7 minutes, I'd like you to, you spoke about the issue of valuation just recently. And I know quite a lot of people on this call, I know there are quite a lot of estimators and valuers. What do you think? I want your final words, speak to the minds of what do you think surveyors should be doing, especially now that there are a lot of opportunities in this segment. What do you think immediately? What are the low-hanging fruits for us as surveyors in this aspect of green building with regards to retrofitting or whatever? What are the low-hanging fruits? Then in terms of the evaluation that we talked about, I mean, I just imagine when you talked about like bringing somebody in from South Africa to come and do evaluation here just because of the gap in terms of knowledge How do you think, from the academia and the practice, how do we get this sorted out so that we're able to do this properly? And maybe the last thing I was going to ask this question earlier on, but I think it just come to me now. You talked about design earlier on when you started. You talked about the positioning of building, this and all that. Are the architects who design building, are they well into this green building? So that if, for example, as an investor, you are approaching, so it's not as if you may not have that idea, but maybe an architect who also knows that, oh, this is something that you must begin to factor into building. How much of involvement are the architects also in this space? So that whilst designing building and development, they are able to give advice and offer advice in terms of green building. So, I mean, just wrap up generally with this in mind. I've talked about what will you speak to the mind of surveyors? And we'll talk about people coming to do valuation because of the knowledge gap. What do you think we can do in this regard? And lastly, what are the architects' involvement with regards to design and development with green building as we begin to wrap up?
All right, thank you, Sonjo. So let me start from the last question. So when it comes to green buildings, and if you come to in the Green Building Council, you'll find out that it's not about a particular profession. As long as you are a stakeholder in the built environment, whether you're an architect, whether you're an estate surveyor, a civil engineer, quantity surveyor, builder, as long as you're a stakeholder in the built environment, then we're all working together, because the aim is not for one profession. The aim is for everybody, right? So sadly, the level of awareness is as poor among architects as it is among estate surveyors. So in the council, we get the opportunity to work with them, and so we understand that it's almost the same. There are architects that do not know what you mean when you say green buildings. Do you understand? So yes, so the awareness is, and the council tries, to go through the various institutions, to have like seminars to educate people and so on and so forth. So the level of awareness is the same, right? So it means that as an investor, you would need to find an architect that is actually versed in this green building issues before, because you may even be suggesting to an architect that they're fighting you and saying no. Architects are very particular about aesthetics sometimes. So yes. For your first question, when I teach, I usually tell my students that I don't care what anybody says, but estate surveyors are custodians of the environment, right? Because we're in the process from the day the investor starts thinking that I feel like developing, we are in the process, that we're the ones you talk to know, is it a good idea? What do you think? What should I do? Okay, how do I get land? So I feel like estate surveyors are custodians of the environment, right? And so it's very, very important that estate surveyors are versed in matters of sustainability. So let's even leave valuation aside. Let's look at property management, facilities management, right? What is the aim? Your aim is, as much as possible, to make sure that your building is operating maximally at the barest cost. That's your aim. Isn't that what we want for green buildings? Okay. You want to make sure that your occupants are comfortable. Your building is working perfectly. Okay. And you are spending the least possible amount. It's the same thing we're looking for. So if we say a sustainable building, it actually pays a facilities manager. Okay. Because you're getting less complaints about heat, electricity, I'm hot, increase the AC, reduce. If once you can get it right from the onset, then your building works perfectly. So I think estate surveyors need, to be more concerned about this green thing. I'm managing a property. Every time they're saying there's no water. How about we do something that makes, water more available, and at less cost? Okay. So I think that estate surveyors and valuers really need to understand features, green building features. There are a ton of green building features. Like I said, you can't say that it's only these 10 things. No, there are so many things that you can do, that can increase the functionality, improve the functionality of your building. And when we come to valuation, I think, look, it's not just estate surveyors. Everybody, we can't stay in one place. You have to continue learning, right? I can't say I'm now a registered estate surveyor and valuer. There's nothing to learn again. No, trends are changing, and we must be ahead of. We need to be ahead of it, because you don't want your client to come and ask you something and you're looking like, what is it talking about? So it's important that we keep studying, we keep trying to understand what are the new things, how do we bring it into our businesses, how do we bring it into our practices, how do we present these things to our clients in such a way that, we're actually interested in, listening to us. And how do we stop foreigners from coming to take our businesses here in the country?
Great, great. Great,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so very much, Dr. Tenny. I don't know. Please, from the back end, let's see if you can do this in 1 minute. There's another hand I'm seeing up. Please, can you promote that person, bring him or her up, introduce yourself, and quickly unmute yourself and ask your question quickly. If you can do this in 1 minute, 2 minutes, so that we can. Can you unmute yourself? You're already up. Please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, ask your question, or make your comments. I'm sure you can hear me. Unmute yourself. You're already promoted. Unmute yourself, ask your questions, or make your comments so that we can wrap up. I just want to give you 1 minute if you're able to do that. Okay, I'm sure this person is not unmuting himself or herself. So we have to, we have to just, Dr. Tenny, let me use this medium to say a very big thank you to you for coming on board and doing justice to this topic and talking to us about the need for us to pay close attention. I mean, we've been talking since, and I'm sure as many the videos should be available in the videos should be available, and we'll be willing to share with all the registered people who have their email addresses with us. Thank you for speaking with us on the topic opportunities in green building investment in Nigeria. You've done justice to this, and indeed it's an eye-opener. And honestly, Dr. Tony, at some point we'll definitely still have to bring you back, because we're talking about sustainability, and I know this is what a lot of people are promoting now. I mean, a lot of people are promoting, and we must increase the level of awareness. And we're doing this in our little space, and I'm sure we can do a whole lot more, collaborating together, ensure that we do this. Also, for everyone who have been on this call, for every participant, we want to thank you, especially for those who sent message and sent quite some message and couldn't log in. I mean, we're sorry about whatever technical glitches that we had. Sorry about that. You can always go back to the video, the links, and you can also catch up on all the knowledge and all the information that's been shared here. Dr. Tenny is somebody who is very open, and at some point, if you want to have a conversation with her directly, you can reach out to us. I mean, we can link you up with Dr. Tenny. Like I said, Dr. Tenny currently is the assistant and the acting head of the Department of Estate Management Department at the Nile University in Abuja. Before now, Dr. Tenny had actually done a lot, Yabatech, University of Lagos, and now she's at the Nile. Like I said earlier on, if I was going to read her profile, I mean, we'll be talking and talking and talking about that. So thank you so very much, Dr. Tenny. We'll look forward to, okay, so I can see some people are sending their email addresses. Don't worry, we're going to send them to you as usual. We've always done that. I will also send the slides to you, as many who are also interested. I'll get the slides and we're going to send them across to you. Dr. Tenny, thank you so very much. I think I need to come back to the classroom so that...
Thank you for having me. Please, we're waiting for you in the classroom.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. Everyone on this, I mean, we took quite a role of our time, and I'm sure everybody on this call knows that this has been indeed a wonderful session. And I can assure you, please keep your, okay, somebody says, thank you, Dr. Tenny. Udu and the Musele team for putting this together. It's been quite educative. Thank you, Udu Akpan. Thank you. And we'll also send some email addresses. Don't worry, we'll get them across. So we want you to just keep your hands on the ground. Another topic will be coming across your way next month, in the month of July. So we'll send all the topics, and I can assure you it's going to be an interesting and very, very good topic as well. Once again, it's good having you, and we appreciate your coming. So at this point, this webinar is brought to a close, and we wish you a fruitful day. Enjoy the rest of your day, and have a good day. Thank you very much, and God bless. Bye. Yeah, right.
Are you sure whether they've all left or people were advertising them? Okay, you are still. Just more questions. More than complain of one thing. How about you? When everybody finish, I said, our video is still playing. Let everybody finish making. Video is playing. You know the short there? Have you heard me? Is this phone we're having this? It's not showing. Eh? You see how this? They say there is something. No, I want to know why they say they're not seeing it. But the video is off. Or is it not the same? Oh yeah, end it. End it. End the webinar. End it.